All right, vampires rule. Whoa, cool it, dude. You're wrinkling the cape.
My boy, I'm killing my boy.
Hello everyone, I'm Aaox, and I sincerely hope that you've all been keeping well. How have you all been passing the interminable self-isolation of quarantine? Me? Oh, you know, same old, wake up, stare gormlessly into the void, look at pictures of anime girls on Twitter, and then plot the genocide of the human race, and by that I mean watch Netflix's Castlevania. There isn't really a whole lot of precedent for this kind of thing being particularly good, is there? I mean, I know there was the Devil May Cry anime, which was okay, and then there was the Bayonetta anime, which was not very good at all, and who could forget the classic adaptation of Custer's Revenge? But by and large, to say that the video game industry hasn't done very well when it comes to adaptations into more traditional mediums of entertainment is to say that the eruption of Vesuvius didn't do very well for the prices of real estate in Pompeii. I suppose in hindsight the secret is to have very little in the way of plot in the first place, but apparently there's a whole pantheon of Castlevania games with the deepest of lores that I just never touched. This show prominently features characters and plot elements from the 2005 explosion of mediocrity, Curse of Darkness, for example, a game that I did not know existed until after my second watch-through of this series. The lore here, it turns out, is deeper than the pitch of the average male character's voice acting, so let's bite down on the metaphorical jugular of standard reviewing procedure and start waffling about the people responsible. Originally penned by the recently outed as a sexual abuser like just last month Warren Ellis as a direct-to-TV movie in 2007, Castlevania went through a fairly depressingly standard development hell before it was finally boarded in 2015 by Adi Shankar, whose graceful touch apparently was all it took for the show to be promptly resurrected like a modern-day Lazarus, except for the fact that it's a television show and not a human man, by Netflix, the streaming service to whom no corpse is too sacrosanct to prevent wanton exhumation. Tangentially related, but that very same Adi Shankar now apparently has the rights to both Hyper Light Drifter and Devil May Cry, and apparently plans to start an unofficial Netflix bootleg universe, which sounds very funny to me despite how much I loathe the entire concept of media universes now. I once slugged a stranger in the nose for using it in a sentence, and he promptly described the attack as the latest entry in the long-running Grievous Facial Injury cinematic universe. Castlevania, for the uninitiated, is a series of video games by The No-No Company, about various generations of a family of Chad vampire hunters tracking a very angry man into Eastern Europe and killing him over and over again until it became about androgynous young men in trench coats backflipping through a series of mansions. So a fairly standard series progression. Then you've got that written down, I hope. Fashionable muscular men kill Dracula to save Eastern Europe. Basically all you need to know. No, it's not fucking JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Here, look, here's some gameplay. That should get you up to speed.
You have Uno, you fucking dick! I don't have it, you fucking monster! You have Uno!
As such, the adaptation had a loose framework to build itself around and a wealth of very thinly defined characters with which to populate its world, and thus had a lot of material to flesh out but no real starting point with which to do so, which is why Season 1 basically serves as an excuse to introduce us to the tone and to the characters of whom most are endearing in that alcoholic way that's quintessentially Eastern European. Trevor Belmont is a drunk prick who hates most everyone he comes across when he's not vomiting into his own shoes. It's so nice to meet a kindred spirit, honestly, and the weight of his family name almost literally hangs from his neck. His status as an unceasingly miserable git with a heart of gold, blackened by time and alcohol abuse, straddles a terrific line between dry humor and black comedy, and I enjoy him tremendously because of it. Cypher Belnades is a peppy but very capable mage, and Alucard talks in a hushed, angry whisper about how much he hates his dad, although even that's paid off well in the closing episodes of Season 2. I've always been a sucker for the whole "this cast of characters reads like a D&D party" shtick a la Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's really prominent this time around. They're a charmingly obnoxious bunch, and their repartee is both very funny and oddly believable, something I think can be very readily attributed to the use of strong accents and stronger language, which Castlevania can get away with since it's rated mature.
He shouldn't die. Yes, fuck you.
The voice acting is rather excellent across the board, really. They went and nabbed a bunch of British celebrities to provide the sounds of Wallachia, since The concept of a voice actor doesn't seem to exist here, and we just take people from other disciplines whenever there's some animated dullard in need of a voice. Alucard in particular talks like he's trying to sound threatening over Xbox Live, but doesn't want his mother to hear any of the nasty things he's saying. I know I made one of my classic high-quality jokes earlier on about the average pitch of the male voice acting, and I will reiterate my earlier statement that, as a whole, the voice acting is very good, but God knows the inmates in a Russian gulag would sound less grizzled than our motley band Wallachian friends. Some characters actually required me to have subtitles on, even though they were speaking English. To highlight my point, I'm going to read the next paragraph as though I were Alucard's VA. Another thing that drives the D&D party comparison home is how often the gang just casually screw up. There's so many gaffes in this show. A veritable smorgasbord of gaffes. Gaffes as far as the eye can see. Bunch of absolute idiots, I love it. Nothing makes a cast more entertaining than watching them drunkenly stumble into the eagerly waiting maw of minor catastrophe. Season 1 is basically a short little prelude to get our three main characters together for Season 2, and it does that job well enough, coupled with some rather fantastic fight sequences, which are, if you'll forgive the pun, essentially the reason for the season. I think special mention ought to be made for the blue-eyed demon, whose absolutely chilling repartee with the clergyman really cemented my appreciation for this show. Your God's love is not unconditional. He does not love us, and he does not love you. Man, what a good show. Something you'll note repeatedly throughout your time watching Castlevania is the whip fighting animation. It is absolutely beautiful to watch, like being beaten to death with poetry. I've never wanted to have sex with the concept of fighting people with a whip before watching this. And by the way, this dark, gritty violence, this is brought to us by, amongst others, Studio Frederator. This is the team that animated Fairly Odd Parents doing this. They draw actual real human breasts even. It's like hearing your mother swear for the first time. I'm so proud of them. Also, I should reiterate that this show is rated M for mature. Really, the animation in this series is excellent across the board for the most part. As I just said, the fighting can be exquisite at times, absolutely breathtaking. As soon as Trevor whipped a passing Chode's eye out in Season 1, I knew that I was on board, and some of the fights in the second season are just God. Some of the most entertaining fight choreography in a series I've yet watched. Season 2 is very much my favorite of the bunch, really. In addition to the already massively entertaining core cast, we've got some incredibly compelling left-field add-ons, namely Hector and Isaac, Dracula's resident monster mashers. It'd be very easy to think that one might spend the entire time watching the intrigue in Dracula's court as waiting for the show to get back to Trevor and friends, but Isaac in particular is just an absolutely superb character. It's paced well, it's got some marvelously funny banter between the leads, and the Viking vampire Godbrand, voiced by the inimitable Peter Stormare, is just a complete joy. Really, the whole vampiric side of the story is substantially more compelling than it has any right to be. The story is simple but strong, and it resolves itself extremely well, but that is the important takeaway from the end of Season 2, is that the story does, in fact, resolve. It is over at the end of Season 2. It's been told. So yeah, Season 3 then. In Season 1, the team assembles, in Season 2, they take the fight to Dracula, and in Season 3, everyone sort of piddles around, doing their own things that may or may not relate to an ethereal, grander arc. It reads really as a setup to a fourth season, happily confirmed as that is. That's not too much of an issue, but it does mean that Season 3 feels rather meandering. That isn't, of course, to say it's without merit. It has the cast split off into not 2, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arcs. Some are more congruent than others. Trevor and Cypher work to uncover the machinations of a bizarre cult of insane monks in a small town with their new friend, the best character ever, Saint-Germain, who's off reading books and inspiring me to become ever more pretentious in a desperate attempt to catch up. Hector is imprisoned by a coven of vampires and must resist being pressed into their service, but that's proving difficult because the horny one keeps trying to have sex with him. Isaac is on a road trip with the lads, and Alucard is off, hanging out with foreign exchange students, cooking, quietly going insane. We can all relate. 2020's been a tough year. Whilst the main gang were my favourite part of Season 2, it's very hard to overstate just how impressed I was with Isaac as a character in Season 3. The dialogue scenes between Isaac and the latest episode's armchair philosopher were, to me, riveting, breathtaking, absolutely and fundamentally compelling. His voice acting, provided by the absolutely top of the line, oh god I am so sorry, Adetokunbo McCormack, is an absolute gift to listen to. His pronunciation is slow and methodical, not overly emotionally wrought, but both sinister and deceptively calm. It is like warm honey if warm honey were a voice. His conversational sparring partners always have quite thick accents, which means, at least, again for me, I expect this is quite subjective, that I was forced to specifically pay close attention to every spoken line, dwell on every single word. His conversation with the captain, in particular, was one of the most riveting scenes in the entire series thus far. If there is a reason to watch Season 3, it's Isaac. Well, it's also to watch Trevor whip the brains out of several very excellently designed monsters, but we have to at least pretend to be more than a bunch of Neanderthals hooting and hollering in anticipation of the next bludgeoning. Hector's arc in the third season had a lot of moments where I and the friend I was watching it with responded with, "Come on Hector, you're smarter than this," which did give it a certain campy, "don't go in there" vibe, but it also seems to belie some serious lack of forethought on the behalf of the supposedly intelligent character. Admittedly, he's portrayed as quite naive, but it does smack a bit fool me twice when the shoe does finally drop. "I can't believe I'm being betrayed by vampires," says the man who, only months prior, was twice betrayed by vampires. I would describe Season 3's climax, insert joke here because they all have sex at the end of it, as disappointing, however. Well, 2 of the arc's resolutions are disappointing, and in a bold departure from my standpoint on Monster Girl Quest, I think the best endings here are the ones without sexual intercourse. Trevor and Cypher get away from Season 3's ending relatively unscathed. Isaac has basically spent the entire season attempting to go from point A to point B and has only just gotten there come season's close. And whilst Hector's ending felt inevitable, Alucard's entire arc this season just felt like the cinematic equivalent of the human appendix, serving no purpose other than to eventually blow up for seemingly no reason and cause irreparable damage to the colon. So I suppose the question here is Castlevania a journey worth embarking on? And had you asked me that question before Season 3 aired, I would have given a resounding yes with no asterisks, but in Season 3, we seem to be careening towards a grander mythos and a larger scale of conflict in which 4 main camps are embroiled in a multi-dimensional conflict with no clear idea of who to root for other than the de facto champions of the story, Trevor and Cypher. Hector comes off as a mistreated puppy, Isaac is supposed to be sinister but rather seems a perfectly rational, charismatic philosopher for the most part, ignoring that whole does want to commit genocide thing, and Alucard just gets fucking torpedoed out of the left field for, presumably, the purposes of kicking up some drama in Season 4. He's the USS Maine of Castlevania. The real kicker then is if Season 4 is worth the build-up that was basically the entirety of Season 3. Obviously, having lost my powers of clairvoyance thanks to losing that particular bet with a passing oracle, I lack the ability to tell you at this exact moment in time whether or not that's going to be the case. I might actually suggest you watch the first 2 seasons and then wait until Season 4 comes out and watch 3 and 4 together, because they very much seem like they'll be 2 halves of a greater whole. Of course, if you're having a great time watching the show, and I honestly believe you very much will be, provided you're not squeamish or overly sensitive to demons shit-talking God, then Season 3 certainly isn't bad. It's just not as good as Season 2. It's more complex, bordering on overwrought, and it ends in a very unsatisfying series of depressing premature climaxes, not unlike the love lives of several of its main characters, but it is still Castlevania, which means that it is still fundamentally good. I just hope they can see it through to the end.